Thanks for listening to Star Lores. If you like the show, please consider subscribing and giving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help us make more great content by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com. We would also love to hear from you on social media. You can follow Star Lores on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Enjoy the show, and may the Force be with you.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Life is war. In our efforts, we have learned that life is not rare. Rather, given a chance, life will occur. It is tenacious, aggressive. It seems to crave existence. Whoop, 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 whoop. Tem Ellis, circa 6 BBY. Life has fought a war for survival against entropy and oblivion since it first emerged. Lasting long enough to ensure a legacy in the next generation is the only objective in this war. The first enemy life faces is the void in which it hangs so precariously. Interstellar dust has the elements necessary for organic chemistry, but aside from that, space is not friendly. DNA-destroying cosmic rays, planet-killing supernovae, giant asteroids on collision courses, and caustic atmospheres are only some of the many hazards that prevent life from finding a way in the cold emptiness of space. The conditions which led to carbon-based life forms probably came about first on a planet like Goroth Prime around 5 billion years BBY. Silicon-based life may have required a different nursery environment, as these beings seem to thrive in outer space. The process of natural selection allows adaptable organisms to complete their ultimate objective and produce progeny who have viable offspring of their own. The environments in which life arises are constantly changing, and so the kinds of mutations which are beneficial also change, and this eventually leads to speciation, the emergence of new forms of life that cannot reproduce with ancestral forms, but only their own. Taxonomy is the field of study that demarcates species on the basis of their shared characteristics. By taxonomy's systematics, life contains 3 domains: archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. Eukarya and its kingdoms, Animalia, Plantae, and Bacteria, are the most accessible and well understood. Further taxonomic divisions include phylum, order, class, genus, and species. In the tree of life, the plant kingdom is the largest by biomass, if not also diversity and distribution. Plants acquire energy through photosynthesis, converting solar radiation into chemical energy. Plants become batteries of a sort for the beings that cannot directly make use of solar energy. Sentient plants, like the neti, may resent such comparisons, though sentience is extremely rare in the plant kingdom. Those creatures that convert the energy stored in plants are themselves used as energy sources for other beings, and so on and so forth. This forms a food web, an interconnection of predator-prey relationships that connects all beings in an ecosystem. Constantly changing environments mean that adaptations become obsolete or maladaptive in their ecological context, leading to extinction. Species usually go extinct as part of the unfolding ecologies of their planets, many examples of which were displayed in the holographic zoo of extinct animals on Coruscant. The life history of any species, on average, is about 1 million years, counting from its emergence to its disappearance in the fossil record. Extinction is a normal part of life for a species, just as death is a normal part of life for an individual. Civilizations, an outcome of a particular aspect of biology, can cause extinction. Typically, such anthropogenic extinction events coincide with new survival strategies on the part of the offending species. For example, cannibal arachnids and a host of other flora and fauna went extinct on Duro as a result of pollution caused by widespread industrialization there. Various iterations of the Mandalorian culture were responsible for a variety of extinction events across the galactic biome.
Master, sir, I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
They live inside me.
Inside your cells, yes. And we are symbionts with them.
Symbionts?
Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force.
Midichlorians. All known living cells contain midichlorians, ranging from around 2,000 to 25,000 organelles per cell. These microscopic, intelligent organisms are thought to be the physical substrate through which the Force interacts with the physical universe. Life relies on them in some way, and they can resume the cellular functions required for life that have otherwise been stopped. The etheric energy of the Force is even capable of bypassing reproductive strategies and conceiving life in a living host. Some evidence suggests that midichlorians first evolved on the planet in the deep core. At some point, the primordial midichlorians became symbiotic with other creatures, both requiring and being required by them for survival. Midichlorians are said to be linked by a single consciousness. In this way, they form a superorganism similar to, some respects, some fungi species, which are connected by widely distributed mycelium. Rather than providing physical nutrients to the fruiting bodies, the midichlorians provide a connection from the Force to all living beings. Empirical analysis of midichlorians has fallen in and out of vogue throughout history. Studying them has been suppressed by governments through legislation like Statute 0BCP01198, and the Jedi Order discouraged their study at certain points. During a pro-empirical period, the Jedi measured the number of midichlorians present in red blood cells as a marker for Force aptitude. Qui-Gon Jinn used a midichlorian sampler attached to his comlink in order to test Anakin Skywalker's midichlorian count. Later in life, Anakin, then known as Darth Vader, was obsessed with his midichlorian count and used a blood testing system in his meditation chamber to check it. The Sith were fascinated with the microorganisms, believing them to be a key ingredient into an elixir of life. This is a predictably dark chapter in the story of Xenobiology. Sorzius Zin and Sevis Va used the power of midichlorians to create terrible monstrosities like behemoths and warworms, which the Sith used in military campaigns. Darth Plagueis killed and revived a rival using midichlorians dozens of times in his experiments. Later on, Plagueis triggered a population-wide psychosis through his experiments, a fate shared by the planet Vajun, whose aristocrats had a similar fascination with midichlorians. Continuing in his master Plagueis' legacy, Darth Sidious wrote part of a voluminous tome called The Creation of Monsters, detailing his grim alchemical research, but died before finishing it.
In Xenobiology, The ecosystem studied is the entire galaxy, and has been for at least 1 million years. There's evidence of interstellar life prior to 1 million BBY, but not with the level of distribution and interconnection observed from 1 million BBY on. Though this is a long time, it is only one generation on an evolutionary scale. The evolutionary trajectory of the galactic biome has only just begun. By the reckoning of some, the ancient and mysterious celestial culture seeded the galaxy with life. They tightly controlled entire species populations and engaged in some of the earliest recorded interstellar travel and colonization. They were capable of massive terraforming, up to and including moving planets from one solar system to another. The Corellian system is thought to have been assembled by the Celestials, as evidenced by its anomalous elemental composition and strange planetary orbits. It was due to the Celestials that an enduring pattern of interstellar exchange of elements, viruses, bacteria, flora, fauna, and energy was established. Biologist Dr. Innsmouth Bowen went so far as suggesting that the Celestials may have created the universe itself. There is little confirmed fact surrounding the Celestials, other than advanced relics like sinkhole and center point stations scattered throughout the galaxy. They appeared in the mythologies of many worlds, in references to serpents and snake-like beings. The insectoid sentient Kilix believed that the Force itself was the domain of the Celestials, while Jedi and Sith legends tell of the species merging wholesale with the Force. Whether this merging implies something metaphorical, or that their individual cells were consumed by or merged with midi-chlorians, is unclear. From this murky and speculative territory, the current conception of the galactic biome emerges.
Herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores participate in the standard food webs that sustain most life. Silicivores, like space slugs and the amorphous Thanu, can eat inorganic matter like rocks, thus bypassing the energy constraints of most terrestrial animals, and are usually themselves silicon-based. Many silicivores are extremophiles, living in conditions as extreme as the vacuum of space and active volcanoes, where there are no resources to support populations of less hardy life. Exogorths, commonly known as space slugs, often live in asteroids. Being silicivores ranging in size from 1 to 900 meters, starships, asteroids, and potentially planets are all on the menu for these blind behemoths. Exogorths navigate space by using a highly developed network of sensory neural buds in the dorsorostral section of their body above their jaws. They are agile creatures and can travel in tunnels they dig throughout their asteroids, as well as between asteroids. Exogorth digestive tracts, like most animals, support their own biomes. The key difference is size, and the creatures that live in an exo's gut are macroscopic rather than microscopic. The sensory nuclei of the exogorth nervous system makes up approximately half of their neural tissue by mass, and so when they decide to hunt such prey as starships, they are skilled predators. Once exogorths reach a certain size, a hormonal response is triggered, and they split into two individuals. This process is known as reproduction by fission, and is often a reproductive strategy of organisms that lack sexual organs. After this, they grow until they presumably reach fission size once again. The fact that exogorths reproduce like some species of carbon-based planarians may be an example of convergent evolution, in which unrelated animals evolve similar adaptations or phenotypes to deal with similar environmental pressures. Exogorth variants included giants, crimson, and Kularin. The Kularin, in particular, were known to be trainable and were selectively bred for such. There was once a bioengineered variant of Exogorth which was hyperspace capable. This subtype escaped to wild space circa 3900 BBY, never to be seen again by xenobiologists. These variations hint that, like planarians, a lineage of exogorths can change from fission to sexual reproduction, given the appropriate conditions. Despite their awe-inspiring size, powerful jaws, and mountainous teeth, exogorths were not apex predators of the void. In fact, they sustained most of their metabolism by passive energy absorption rather than predation or silica grazing. The most fearsome space predator is the Colossus wasp, possibly the largest species in the widely distributed and diverse Hymenoptera order. These winged insects were orders of magnitude larger than their wasp cousins, typically growing in excess of 1 kilometer. Like other spacefaring animals, they were silicivores and ergivores, and often preyed on the legendary exogorths. Compared to Minox and Exos, their habitat range is restricted, and their life cycle appears to be reliant on the planet Ithel, where adults spawn and raise juveniles to maturity. They forage in the nearby asteroid belt and are not seen outside the Stellus node. Minox are a silicon-based species of bat-like ergivore that commonly live in asteroid belts and as parasites on spaceship hulls and inside exogorths. Their membranous wings indicate an evolutionary heritage in atmospheric conditions. Inadvertently contaminating a starport with Minox could result in fines, ship impounding, and prison sentences for careless captains. Their diet consists largely of the kind of electromagnetic energy and elemental compounds found in starships, so they wreak havoc on freighters and starliners as they eat through hulls and siphon energy away from primary systems. Although there were subspecies of terrestrial Minox, the most common variant by far lived exclusively in space and had a deadly allergy to helium. This is the second most abundant element in the known universe and is found in most planetary atmospheres. Exposure to helium causes Minox to rapidly expand, like a balloon being filled with air until their body ruptures. The mutation that presumably led to the helium allergy drove Minox to carve out a helium-free niche with very few competitors. That is, spaceship hulls, asteroids, and space slug guts. Minox hitched rides on unwitting starships and spread across the galaxy in massive numbers. By contrast, terrestrial Minox are relatively rare, existing on only a handful of worlds. Silicon-based life seems to be particularly suited to vacuum conditions and is rare on planets. Therefore, space Minox could be the common ancestor of their planetary variants. A definitively carbon-based interstellar species is Dianaga. They have spread throughout the galaxy by tiny larvae that find suitable habitats in the waste management and sewer systems of large starships. These cephalopods have 7 tentacles, a single eye at the end of a long eye stalk, and a toothed mouth at the bottom of their mantle. Many metropolitan cities have Dianoga living in their sewers. Rather than being considered pests necessarily, waste management professionals will sometimes allow them to live unmolested in sewers because they can remove large buildups of organic matter, and the high mineral content of their excrement is quite valuable. Though they prefer scavenging, Dianoga will hunt live prey if nothing dead is around, and can sometimes pose a threat to local sentient populations.
Xenobiology. Planets on which life most frequently survives have a median mass of about 5.972 times 10 to the power of 24 kilograms, a gravity of 9.80 meters per second, a single main sequence or mid-sized middle-aged star, and an atmosphere somewhere in the range of 70% oxygen and 20% nitrogen, with numerous other gases making up the remaining 10%. In a galaxy with billions of life-supporting planets, there are many exceptions. For example, Tatooine orbits the barycenter of 2 stars, Tattoo 1 and Tattoo 2. Another exception is a planet Doran, which has an atmosphere of only trace amounts of oxygen and high amounts of other gases not commonly found in high concentrations in other atmospheres. The anthropoid Keldor species managed to evolve on Doran in conditions that are toxic to most life in the galaxy, and it has supported a marginal ecosystem. Mixed classes are common xenobiological taxa. For example, Reptavias have features of both the Reptilia and the Aves classes. The bogwing and other creatures of Dagobah, for example, could fly, yet were cold-blooded as opposed to warm-blooded birds of the Aves class. Reptomammals, like rancors, are generalists that thrive in many disparate environments. They retain ancestral reptilian traits, but have also evolved some of the generalist features which have led to their mammalian cousins' evolutionary success. Nar Shaddaa and Duxun were life-supporting moons which orbited planets which also had ecosystems. Many planet-moon systems form their own interplanetary biomes and share species and similar environments. The jungle moon of Duxun and the planet it orbited, Onderon, shared atmospheres at certain times of the year, when their orbits drew them close. This allowed Reptavian Drexels to travel between worlds. The intrepid Drexels had a significant impact on the history of their native worlds, and played a significant role in the Beast Wars of Onderon, which in turn set the stage for the Great Sith War. It is also possible that the Onderon-Duxun system exchanged microbes from their upper atmospheres alongside the Drexels. To add further complexity to xenobiology, it is not confined to a single galaxy. Firefist, a dwarf galaxy that orbits the galaxy far, far away, supports at least several sentient species, and therefore planetary biomes of its own. Firefist sentients, like the Nagai and the Faerun, are not known to differ fundamentally from the galaxy they orbit, so the predictions of xenobiology may hold true in galaxies throughout the universe. The strongest case for abundant extragalactic life lies in the exceptional Yazongvong species, whose native galaxy is far more distant than Firefist. The Vong might be thought of as cells of a larger being. Their homeworld, Yazantar, was itself living and sentient. To deal with an alien military threat, the Vong established communication with their world and learned how to create biotechnology. With weapons built from biology, the Vong defeated their enemies. Other biotechnologies were based largely around the manipulation of coral species called yorick, Koros strona, or world ships in BASIC, were one of the largest and most complex Vong constructs, dwarfed only by their living planets. At the conclusion of the war, Yazantar died and has severed the Vong connection with the Force by an unknown mechanism. This is interesting, as it indicates that midichlorians either have an extragalactic origin or have themselves crossed the unimaginably vast deserts of space between galaxies and kindled life there. Before dying, Yazongtar birthed a seed which grew into another living planet called Xenoma Sekot. Vong history then details a period of conquest of many species and worlds across their galaxy. Sometime later, Xenobiology crossed intergalactic space. There's another enemy life must contend with. If it survives long and enough and produces sentience, its own creations. On several occasions, self-replicating synthetic life forms, like the Silentium and Abominor, have arisen and eliminated or attempted to eliminate their biological creators. This is what led the Yazong Vong down the brutal path of conquesting their galaxy and of killing over 300 trillion sentients in the galaxy far, far away. Finally, the xenoanthropologist Mammon Hool claimed to have established contact with sentients from the Milky Way galaxy. If true, this means that there are at least 4 galaxies that support life, and the implications for biodiversity in the universe is staggering.
Sentientology.
A species given the sentient definition is considered able to reason and understand abstract, metaphorical concepts and ideas, make and use tools, and communicate with written or spoken language. Mammon Hool.
Definitions of sentience are protean and elusive. There are no hard and fast lines of demarcation between a being that experiences sentience and one that does not, and the phenomenon likely exists on a spectrum. Where do instinct and operant conditioning end, and reason begin? What marks the difference between an abstract metaphor and a concrete idea? Are the coconuts used as camouflage by Amphioxtopus marginatus tools, or does an object need to be modified, and its use and modification taught to others before it is considered a tool? Some societies believe sentience confers certain inalienable rights and responsibilities. Others view the phenomenon in a callous or sadistic way. The Order of Sith Lords needed no justification to violate sentient rights other than the capability of doing so. The Infinite Empire required the suffering of sentient beings to power their technology with the dark side of the Force. The Anzadi consumed mental essence, perhaps the closest physical corollary of sentience, as nourishment. Sentience appears to have developed, like most traits, as an adaptive strategy, or as an outcome of adaptive strategies that did not compromise fitness. Regardless of its origins, sentience allows creatures to expand the borders of their environment of evolutionary adaptation, and to survive existential threats that beings without sentience cannot. It facilitates widely generalizable survival strategies, and as such seems to develop with high frequency in species with other generalist adaptations, like mammals and classes with mammalian phenotypes. Sentience seems to underpin civilizations. When it develops, that species tends to become the apex of their homeworld, and often multiple worlds. It is sentience that lies at the heart of the galactic biome, and without it, there would only be isolated islands of life in the void. Culture and civilizations do not necessarily develop from sentience alone. The behemoth, dune-dwelling sarlacc has an atypical sentience and bears some morphological resemblance to cephalopods and other classes. It is distributed on at least half a dozen worlds, and its spores can survive space travel, but its largest population is on Tatooine. This creation is as enigmatic as it is dangerous. What empirical data exists on them comes largely from a helmet camera recorded by a bounty hunter who was swallowed by one, the reports of an unidentified Jedi researcher, and the Tusken of Tatooine's oral history. Sarlacc have a slicing beak and grasping tentacles, like cephalopods. They reproduce via spores like protozoans, fungi, and plant, but no known animals. Yet, like only creatures from the animal kingdom, Sarlacc have blood and circulatory systems. The main hunting strategy of Sarlacc are excretion of chemicals into the air that lure animal prey, a tactic commonly used by carnivorous plants. The male Sarlacc is much smaller than the female and attaches itself parasitically to her, like some anglerfish species. The male Sarlacc feeds off the female until he reaches an equivalent size. When the male reaches his adult size, the only part left of the female is her spore sac, which he then fertilizes. Sarlacc have telepathic abilities and are capable of sensing fear and pain in their prey. Telepathy and their long-term memory suggests a nervous system, something generally only found in the animal kingdom. From some reports, it appears that Sarlacc gain additional nourishment from the prolonged negative emotions experienced by the beings they consume, and can induce hallucinations in animals, another trait common to plants. When plants have acute hallucinogenic properties, they are usually caused by alkaloids produced as metabolic byproducts, and protecting the plant from predation, rather than being part of a digestive process of carnivorous plants. The minds of Sarlacc prey are copied in some form, then incorporated into a network of consciousness within the Sarlacc mind. If prey are sentient, then this quality is also conferred into the meta-consciousness. One of the few Sarlacc researchers hypothesized that this consciousness integration took place via a process making use of the messenger RNA of prey animals in the digestive tract. Due to their ravenous carnivory, powerful beaks, grasping tentacles, hazardous habitats, and camouflage dens, few xenobiologists have dared to do extensive field research on sarlaccs. A scientific paper detailing evidence for a definitive linear taxonomic definition of the sarlacc would make a fine graduate thesis for an aspiring, if slightly suicidal, xenobiologist, and could no doubt be published in such widely cited journals as the Journal of Personality and Galactic Psychology, or The Science of Creating Life. The infamous wampas of Hoth also lay somewhere on the spectrum between sentient and non-sentient. These 2-meter bipedal reptomammals weigh in excess of 150 kilos. Their reptilian characteristics are long, sharp talons at the end of their fingers, razor-sharp teeth, and horns. They are skilled hunters and will eat just about anything that moves, and they have elaborate feeding behaviors, both of which indicate high intelligence. Female wampas nurse their offspring, which were born tiny and reared in the manner of marsupials, in a fold of flesh in their mother. Additional mammalian characteristics were their white fur and a body plan similar to many mammalian species, specifically great apes. They share many behavioral characteristics with both arboreal and terrestrial apes, who could also be classified as semi-sentient. Wampa social structure is solitary for the most part, and they usually only gather with others for the purpose of hunting particular prey and mating with females rearing young. Individuals have a huge range of around 100 kilometers. Though they are solitary, they display behaviors of affection to other individuals that they have encountered in the past. Males are capable of making extremely loud vocalizations that can carry over large distances and are used as threat displays to other males or to mark territory. And males will fight one another for access to fertile mates. These fearsome-looking creatures have a sensitive side and will display grief and mourning behaviors such as seen in great apes. Subspecies of wampa include bioengineered cliff variants that lived in Smuggler's Gorge on Gaul, and swamp wampas of Dromondacas, who only differed from the more widely studied Hoth variant in the coloration of their fur. Wampas are considered semi-sentient and endangered by the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances. Considering the predation they demonstrated towards humans living on Hoth, wanton destruction of human property, and the ability to hold a grudge, this is a strange ally for Wampas to have in their war against oblivion. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Biotech Industries, artificial intelligence worth shaving your head for. Consumers and cyborg engineers continue to rate the AJ6 as the best ever made. With the proliferation of new cyborg companies with unproven theories and untested technology, we have to ask, why take chances with your mind? Choose biotech.
And welcome aboard, everyone, to the Millennial Falcon. As we soar through space, it's time for the discussion portion of our episode, where we're going to discuss xenobiology. Mm-hmm. And joining me in the cockpit is Jordan.
Howdy.
And Sam.
Misa Sam Binks.
Our resident Gungan.
I don't think Gungans
I'm not racist at all. I sound like a Mario. I could not maintain the Gungan accent.
I hope not. Can't have a serious discussion with you.
So midi-chlorians, I know they're divisive. Personally, I kind of like midi-chlorians. I like bringing things into the materialistic universe away from the sort of
spirituality,
froofy-doo spirituality stuff that the Jedi were sort of portrayed as before. It sort of breathes more life into the idea of the Force. And then also, there's something very interesting. This is maybe my favorite fact I've discovered in the research for any episode we've done so far. There's actually a microbiologist who discovered a species and named it after midichlorians.
So they are real.
So they are literally real. They're called Midichloriae mitochondriae, and they are a tick. They are a parasite that lives in the mitochondria of a species of tick, and they appear to be at least mutualistic and possibly symbiotic. The distinction there is mutualistic is two organisms who their life cycles are caught up with each other, but neither hurt nor help each other. They just sort of coexist. And then in a symbiont relationship, one would actually help the other.
It's like
one.
Mutually beneficial.
Yeah. And then a parasitic is obviously
beneficial to the parasite.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's interesting. It's a gram-negative, non-spore-forming bacteria. I have no idea what that means.
It just makes you sound smart.
So can you be infected with the Force?
It is an infection, yes.
Yeah, and there is actually
I got this bad rash.
All is Force wills, Jordan.
And I sort of cut it from the episode, but as I was writing about the midichlorians, I was kind of thinking, like, if midichlorians like evolved and based what we know about our mitochondria having a heritage in bacteria and viruses and stuff, a lot of our DNA is actually essentially alien DNA that got transposed to us through some process.
Aliens.
I'm really glossing over aliens. Aliens. I'm not saying it's aliens.
So my opinion on midichlorians, I waffle back and forth. I do like the idea of like a materialistic explanation. It kind of explain a lot of things better in universe. But I also like space magic.
I really like space magic.
I think I like stories that have some element of mystery in it, where things just aren't explained and can't be explained.
Yeah. Or do they even need to be explained?
Yeah, do they? Exactly. Like,
it's just the way things are.
Yeah, there isn't necessarily like a need to explain things all the time. And sometimes I feel, and that's where I kind of waffle back and forth on whether I like the idea of midichlorians.
Yeah, I personally don't like it. I don't think it has a necessary explanation, but at the same time, I don't think it's so destructive to the lore that like it undoes any serious.
However, an asterisk there. Do you not think it's like? So when Qui-Gon first discovers Anakin and his like midichlorian count, all that, like how are they distinguishing what measurement are they using to say Anakin is the chosen one, right? Like Anakin is this very incredibly powerful, gifted person without something like a midichlorian.
Nothing tangible.
Yeah, otherwise it's just guesswork, it seems like.
Right. It's just the word of this crazy guy.
But isn't that what it is anyways? Because the council seems to be skeptical of whether or not he's the chosen one anyways, even with that reading, right? I mean, there's a number of ways you could do that. That's a narrative decision. You don't need power levels to be given as actual factual numbers.
I will say that I think my read of it was that it seemed like Yoda did kind of believe he was the chosen one, but that he was like too old and he wouldn't be able to be.
There's also
to be trained, right?
And there's a philosophical component too. Is like, do they believe the chosen one can be multiple people, or they can reincarnate? Which would, oh, well, we missed it on this one. We'll just wait till we find a new one, right?
Yeah.
That's possible too. I don't know enough about the prophecy, but the other thing is that he could have fleshed out the prophecy. It's like, oh, this child fulfills a lot of the elements of the prophecy. He's a good candidate for the chosen one. Again, you don't need or just feeling it, right? How much of the Force is feelings? Yeah, like Qui-Gon feels a very powerful presence. It literally draws him to Anakin. They find him. He brings him to the temple, and all the Jedi instantly feel this power emanating from this child, right? Yeah. There's 100 different ways they could have told that story differently. I don't think you need hard numbers. Personally.
So another sort of fun thought experiment midichlorians lets us have is that there's the idea that life can't live without the Force, right? And so midichlorians are sort of established as
the origin,
the physical medium through which the Force operates, right? And sort of objective reality. And so if life needs them, then are midichlorians sort of the architects of life? And so are they the first life then? Or did they become mutualistic or parasitic organisms that just attach themselves? And then how did they get into all life? Was it then, as we were talking about, maybe the Force is like a space virus, which is kind of a cool thing?
Yeah.
But those are the questions that now have to be answered because of how it was established. So
but
we
they
know
don't
life
need to be answered.
Hold on. But we do know that life spawned on different worlds at different times. Like, were they, for lack of a better word, inseminated by midichlorians? Maybe.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe though. Like, how did they get across the galaxy? Do they just float in space? Because now they're a physical structure. That's the problem when you make things tangible. Is now you have to explain how did it get from the center of the galaxy out to the fringes of the galaxy.
Exactly.
And all these things are unnecessary questions that they wrote themselves into. So, like you said, did they spawn? Did all life come from midichlorians? I like that personally. Is that okay? They're the first cells or the first beings of life, and therefore they embody life itself, and that is what the Force is.
Whenever you're using magic powers in a narrative, though, you always have the question of where are they from? Yeah, but why is this working like that? So even if you don't have midichlorians, you still just have the first question of, okay, so we see all these spaceships and lasers, and everything seems to obey sort of generally known laws of physics, except for these space wizards. So where does their power come from, right? You always have the force of the gaps argument, right?
I don't agree. I don't agree, because you could explain it away. There's a Force god, or the Force transcends any one individual
identity. Yeah, but my point is, when you
it's
introduce midichlorians, you just move where that Force god appears. Now he's just at the beginning of life rather than at Obi-Wan's mind trick.
Right, but then, like I said, all those other explanations that you need. Okay, how did midichlorians get from planet A to planet B?
I think you're missing my point. So
it's entirely possible.
Well, another question, last question, midichlorians brings up is, I have heard Star Wars described as a space fantasy and not
science fiction.
Not science fiction, but does midichlorians change that?
No.
Why not?
So if you want to play with the hard and fast rules of science fiction, is usually based in reality.
Yeah.
In the sense of like even their technology.
A potential reality.
A potential reality.
Yeah.
So even the technology, if I just make up a bunch of elements that do things, that starts to delve more. And again, even these lines of science, fantasy, and fiction are not.
Yeah, I mean,
They're not
clear.
really hard. Yeah.
Unobtainium is clearly hard science.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
that line shifts.
So I actually read like a book called How Great Science Fiction Works, and this guy seems to delineate between science fiction and fantasy. He basically says a world that hypothetically could be explained scientifically in a scientific way, so that's sort of like his only
But is that using real science or made up science? Right.
But that's so
exactly
much
the question.
Science, that's like so much science fiction is just made up science.
Sure, but there's some science that is like
The other
speculative fiction, let's say.
I was just going to say the synonym for science fiction is speculative fiction.
Right. So
Those are the same thing.
Right. So, could we create a better, more efficient X engine using technology that we see the potential for?
Sure.
Versus I'm just going to make up a material and a fuel source and then pretend that can do whatever I want it to do for narrative purposes.
Okay, so what about something like the X-Men? X-Men like are an evolution of human biology.
Right. So then that's
and
where
they have like more or less magical powers because of that.
Sure, but then you get into, okay, what can an X-Men do? Someone like Wolverine is probably slightly more believable than someone like Cyclops, right? Having bone spurs are a real thing.
Yeah.
Shooting lasers out of your eyes is not. So
I know, but like that, the X-Men would be in science fiction, would it not?
So that's where the lines get blurry. It's like I said, what is considered in the realms of possibility, right? In your hard sci-fi, you have a modern military in space, let's say, and you encounter an alien species. Okay, on the probabilities of math, we know that aliens could potentially exist, but on the what we know about aliens, they don't. So again, where is that line drawn? And that's where it gets super blurry. And I don't think there is a hard line. But I think the number of factors in your whatever material you're covering, okay, we got space magic. That's one tick in the fantasy box.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, we have ships that could theoretically function. Okay, that's a tick in the fiction box, right? Yeah. And then you kind of weigh out the totals and be like, okay, it's more fantasy than fiction or more fiction than fantasy, right?
Yeah, I guess my whole point is I'm not going to as easily especially with the introduction of midichlorians, it muddies the water a little bit on whether or not it's a space fantasy or
I think
sci-fi.
It's just one tick in a huge pile of boxes that I think really outweigh on the fantasy side.
But the only argument for it being a fantasy is the Force.
I don't think so. There's lots.
Like what?
Even like the narrative structure of it.
No,
that has nothing to do with the scientific. The scientific principles.
The only thing that makes it is the Force.
Yeah,
seriously, that's the only thing that makes it like a fantasy. Like beyond that, it's sort of within the realm of
possibility.
I'm with Jordan. With midichlorians, it's certainly on the same level as Star Trek. Like you would then have to say,
but
Star Trek
there's even lots of people
fantasy.
who don't even count Star Trek. The hardline science.
That is true.
Is this the same people who really hated Dark Empire?
No, it's a completely different group of
these same
people
magical people
Sam.
that are in your head only.
Is real life magic then, Sam? Because I just make up groups of people.
I think it is actually.
No, okay.
There's a certain line of
anyways,
thinking
that was just a question, and people, definitely the listeners give your thoughts. Is
Where's
Star
the
Wars
line?
is there a hard and fast line? Is Star Wars a space fantasy or science fiction? Give us your thoughts. Anyways, moving right along to our next point.
More midichlorians. There's this is in the Infinities line, so it's not technically canon. But there's a droid who had the Force. He had midichlorians in his lubricant. That was actually the droid who was going to be bought by Owen.
Yes.
Owen Lars.
Yes.
He blew himself up with the Force because he could sense that R2
was destined
for greatness.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when he sensed Luke, he was like, "Oh no, R2's supposed to be here." So
not me. So he killed himself.
Yeah. So he fell on his.
He's the true hero of Star Wars.
A true Jedi.
So that's fun. A big theme I came across, and I don't think this is really intentional necessarily, but it's sort of the idea of the galactic biome. How if you squint enough and you have a little bit of background knowledge of biology, you can kind of see how a galactic biome semi-coherent galactic biome is sort of set up in the Star Wars universe, and in the exchange that all the planets and their flora and fauna have with each other.
Yeah.
And how you see certain consistencies that seem to go across the galaxy. And then you even see the bounds of the galactic biome, like the unknown regions and wild space sort of exist somewhat outside of there. But then, even then, we have a lot of species who can exist in vacuum and are known to travel between planets.
Yeah, and can carry their own, like Minox living within another species.
Sarlacc have their spores can travel through space as well.
Right, yeah.
So that's cool how the galactic biome works.
Yeah, and
super complicated galactic ecology. If you thought
and
regular ecology gave you a headache.
Once the galaxy like kind of opens up through space travel, like you have the artificial component too.
Exactly.
People are just going to transport trade and animals, and just like as paralleled a lot with
and you also have people like terraforming planets.
Yeah, that's
like
true
that,
too. So they could completely artificially make, and you have planets that are artificial, like Coruscant
and Kashyyyk too is like largely.
You have two kinds of engineering. You have like a naturalistic bioengineering, and then
Yeah.
you have just a planet that's so overly populated it creates its own kind of.
It's almost like a machine planet.
Yeah,
kind of,
exactly, and it creates
the technome.
Yeah, and they have their own wildlife that starts to flourish in that new environment.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it is a very interesting take.
Like Dianaga.
Yeah, exactly.
Living in the sewers of Coruscant.
Yeah.
On that point, though, and I don't know.
Let's go panning for Dianaga poo.
It's valuable.
It's valuable.
Sift through it. On that note, though, one criticism
invest in Dianaga poo futures.
That'll
it's the only thing that'll be valuable in this economy.
when the economy collapses. On that note, though, a big criticism a lot of people have about the ecology of Star Wars and to do with the biomes of planets is that they're very one-dimensional.
Yes.
That's a problem all throughout science fiction, I think, is you see that
you make
trope.
a desert planet or
you have
a
an
forest
ice planet.
or an ice planet.
It's like, why would planet Earth's not like that? Like Mercury's not
any
like
planet
that.
that you could conceive of supporting life, it doesn't make sense that it would be
all one kind.
Yeah,
yes.
one
and even just the
topography.
Even the way a planet is placed in its own solar system would greatly affect its tilt, its angle. There's a lot of factors that play into like differences.
However, to be fair, there is an explanation. Like there's an explanation for Coruscant, and there's also an explanation for Tatooine being the way that it is. And even in Legends, there is.
And even at least Tatooine, like we've got Mars, right? Like
like
geologically, their weather's different, but on the geological level, they're very similar. Lots of sand, and
desert planet. Yeah.
So. And I'm going to push back on this idea too. Even things like an ice planet, there are moons and planets in our solar system that do have a fairly consistent, and it's not even across the board, but they do have a fairly consistent topography.
Yeah.
And geology. I don't know what the right word is to describe.
Topography is part of geology, I think.
Yeah, but I want to like expand more than even geology.
Yeah.
Like the
I think
atmosphere, even the atmosphere.
It's either Io or Enceladus.
That is
Jupiter
true.
that have they're covered in gigantic ice sheets.
Right, exactly, and the whole area is consistent, more or less. I mean, I'm also not an astronomer, so I don't know the details of it.
Yeah.
But my inference from everything that I've seen, is that there are a lot of planets that are fairly consistent. Mars is kind of a bad example because it does have polar regions.
Yeah, but
I mean,
it's just mountains and
right.
dunes.
But that's the other thing too, is that we only see very small sections of these planets that we visit in movies and canon, right? Who's to say another part of the planet looks different?
Yeah.
Or
a lot of
modified
times
version?
you're wrong though. We see like an entire hemisphere of the planet.
Sure, but
that's almost always what we see.
99% of Mars looks very similar, and then
but Mars can't support life naturally.
Sure, yes, and life would change.
Yeah, you just think if a naturally life supporting planet would have like some kind of diverse
ecosystems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to play on what we do observe, and I don't think it's a super strong criticism, but it's there. It exists.
The only one I could maybe accept would be like a water world, like Manan or something, where all life evolves underwater.
Yeah, and it just remains an ocean.
Yeah, so
no big land
there's no
masses.
reason to have like a landmass necessarily.
Right. But even then, like it could have polar regions that are just ice sheets.
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
just drops
yeah.
off into the
Yeah,
ocean and the
yeah,
rest of the planet's ocean.
for
That's
sure.
what I'm saying. Like we only see 90% of,
Yeah.
you know, what's the 10% of the planet on the equator or on the poles, right? Like,
And that brings me up to something. Another, I'm like a cult leader. I like to invent my own language for dealing with these crazy concepts.
Okay.
And so what we're talking about is sort of the representation problem, is what I call it in Star Wars, is that for the most part, all the characters, certainly all the important characters that we see, are anthropoid, meaning they're human-like in some way. They're usually bipedal. They usually just have two arms. They
yeah,
usually
a
just-
recognizable face structure.
a recognizable face structure. They can breathe oxygen and nitrogen in the same concentrations we can, apparently.
Yeah.
They evolved on the same kind of gravity that we have, which is interesting. Although there are species that could breathe methane, and I think a Star Wars element called tokianogen. If there's any chemists who
Can confirm.
can
Yeah.
confirm that if that's a real thing or not. And then there's of course I think it's the Keldor, right? Plo Koon's species.
Yeah, they exist. They definitely exist.
But
the variants, but
the
you're
norm
right.
in the galaxy appears to be Earth-like planets,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's basically what we can infer.
On that note, though, as well, like, could it be that it's those conditions that require life? So all life would follow a similar template or pattern,
Yeah.
right? We don't know.
And then my other question is just that, is this really like sort of a weird kind of space racism where it's just that, like, if you're not like an anthropoid, you don't get into the Galactic Republic or the Galactic Empire?
No, I don't. Well, the Empire is an exception because they were
Yeah.
human centric, but in terms of the Republic, no, I think they're open to other species. The other thing is, like, how easy is it for you to interact with?
But my point is, how rare is it that we actually see that? It's pretty rare.
It depends on the medium that you're reading. Because if you read books or
it's-
comics,
I-
you're
dude,
agreeing.
I've been reading a lot.
Hear me out.
Well, like the Jedi Council is generally very diverse.
But they're
with aliens.
still mostly anthropoid.
Mostly
They're
anthropoid.
still
Yeah,
mostly what
anthropoid. Yeah.
Yes.
And not only that, but they can breathe our atmosphere. Like, that's a huge variable.
But even you reference Plo Koon. I'm just saying it's a matter of percentages. But here's my thing: is maybe through the lens of, like, how easy is it to be a participant in the galactic community, if your species is able to communicate, to breathe.
that's the other side of this problem.
right.
Like,
Exactly.
Even
So-
use the technology in the same
exactly.
way.
If you're a completely sentient tree-like creature,
yeah.
you can't move, you can't do anything. There is actually a Jedi that is very much like a tree. But anyways,
And
Is it
Yeah.
Groot?
yeah, but my point is, suppose you're a permanent fixture. You need to be planted in
Yeah.
your soil. You cannot move, but you're fully conscious. You can
Right.
use the Force,
Yeah.
and you want to join the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Can that even be possible? Right.
Be careful with your lightsaber.
Right. Can
dry season.
right can a void, something the size of a void whale, that's from 40K, but something in Star Wars context, right? Something that big,
Exogorth. Hello.
right? An Exogorth. Could something that massive feasibly participate in galactic politics? Would they care to?
Yeah.
Would a species that can survive only in very stringent planetary conditions, if they left that certain level of gravity or that atmosphere, they would die regardless of oxygen tanks or any other factors. Can they feasibly participate in the galactic, economy?
And that's my question. Like, based on what we see in Star Wars, it sort of seems like life is constricted mostly to Earth-like conditions,
Right.
Yeah.
which is interesting.
I would also say too, just like, obviously this is fiction. We have to have a suspension of disbelief for. We can interrogate it.
Laser
to, like-
swords are totally real. That could happen.
We can interrogate it to, like, hey, this isn't like consistent with the universe as we know it. But it's like, this is part of
This
fiction.
is the rules of this
Yeah,
universe.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm cool with that too.
Yeah.
But it is something with the depth of Star Wars. It's nice to explore, and
It's definitely interesting.
and those are it's very reasonable things that life thrives under certain conditions and creates that template. Whether or not that's true for reality,
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's true for Star Wars.
So
Potentially.
the lifespans of that life, some long-lived species, Diathym and Talortai. I don't even know what those guys are, but they apparently had really long lifespans. Perhaps even indefinite. Other long-lived species, Yoda's unnamed species. I don't know if this is like the unnamed cantina on Tatooine.
No, they don't have a name.
They don't have a name, so Yoda's species doesn't have a name, but they live.
Do you think they'll give it a name in
So George
Mandalorian?
Lucas. So they might now because it's owned by Disney, but while Star Wars was owned by Lucas,
He never wanted
had
them.
a hard line.
Really?
No one gets named. Yeah. He wanted to always keep that a mystery. I don't know if he always had an idea of what he wanted them
Why?
to be.
It seems like there must be a purpose to that.
There could have
I like
been.
it though. It's cool.
Yeah, there could have been that
Like
he
he
kept,
had something in his back pocket.
Yeah, that's
that
what I wonder. Or if he just wanted to keep that mystery. I have no idea.
He just maybe wanted to keep a mystique around Yoda.
Yeah, it's possible. But he had very hard lines about people using that species or naming that species in their stories in the EU. And he had very few like rules.
Do you know what his thoughts are about Baby Yoda?
I have no idea.
Interesting.
Oh, he's actually a consultant on the set of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I know.
So
yeah.
he must have some
He
input.
must not hate it.
No.
But also, like, the species has been depicted in many other
They have,
stories.
and some stories break those rules. There's even a
do they?
primitive tribe of Yoda species
Oh,
seen in a comic book that I think would probably be frowned on by Lucas. But there are some exceptions. But he himself did have some pretty hard edicts about that.
Yeah.
That aside, going back to lifespans,
Huts live up to a millennium. We've touched on them a little bit before.
Wookiees are fairly long lived
And
too.
I was really slimy when we did touch them. Wookiees live for a long time.
Yeah.
How long do they live?
I don't know.
Like a couple hundred?
I don't know what their definite history is, but I'm pretty sure Chewbacca is in the 200
Yeah,
range.
he's pretty old.
Yeah. But
At
is
least
is he old
in
by Wookiee
in
standards?
human terms.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Sleep. There is a subspecies of Bith called the Clackdoor. They didn't need to sleep. But sleep is a bit of a biological anomaly even today.
Yeah, we don't really...
People aren't really sure exactly why.
They just know it's bad if you don't get enough.
Mammals, or not vertebrates at least, all vertebrates, I think, appear to need sleep of some kind. Some other animals don't quite.
Ooh. Sorry, Wookiees can live up to
400 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Also, on another side note, a sort of partially anthropoid species, the one that actually trained in Legends, trained Yoda, was a guy called Gormo, and he was like a serpent with 4 arms and 4 eyes. And that species was called the Hilsarian. His Alrian. So,
Thank you, Jordan.
But
on the Jedi Council, there's also another snake-like
Oporancesis.
Yeah, Rancisis.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He's got torso and arms and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he has 4 arms too.
And he has a really long beard as well.
Yes.
It
and
could,
hair.
are you sure it's not the same species?
It could very well be, and he has a very long snake-like tail.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look up actually his race, and it might be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this species is apparently very powerful with the Force too. So,
Could they sleep though?
I have no idea.
Heads, tails.
Yeah.
Darth Bane, as he grew more powerful in the Force, his need to sleep got less and less. And he would just like regenerate using the dark side. And Palpatine also did the same thing. He would like not sleep.
Yeah.
That's
and
also another.
It looked like hell though.
That's like another famous cult leader tactic. Is a lot of them just stop
Sleep
sleeping at
deprivation.
a certain point. Like initially they stop their followers from sleeping, but then they start getting into speed and stuff, and they stop sleeping as well.
Yeah, but it's also sort of like a thing with a lot of Sith Lords is pursuing eternal life. So
yeah, so sleeping is a waste.
Life extension. Yeah. But anyways,
precisely. Any other xenobiological factoids, guys, or is that it?
I think I'm good.
I hear our R2 unit chirping. We're getting near the starport of Ossus. I've got to go outside and blow some helium on the Minox on the hull of the Millennial Falcon, or else we'll get fined again. Christian forgot to do it last time. And may the Forks be with you.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
I got a bad
Don't forget to give the show a 5-star rating and review, and give us a follow on social media. This episode was produced and edited by me, Jordan Swaim, written and directed by Christian Lutz and Sam Swaim. All original music was scored and recorded by my music project, Farewell to Shadowland.